This PhD is in Mapongology. Mapongology is the study of Joshua Maponga's powerful ideas in catalyzing the process of learning, relearning, and unlearning as it relates to the shaping of new forms of thinking and contributing to the global economy of knowledge, which are shaped by the knowledges from Zimbabwe, Africa, and beyond.
Of course, we are joined by our favorite professor, Professor Robert. You are always graduating with degrees. What is this degree about? What was your thesis title?
Wow, this PhD is in Mapongology. Mapongology is the study of Joshua Maponga's powerful ideas in catalyzing the process of learning, relearning, and unlearning as it relates to the shaping of new forms of thinking and contributing to the global economy of knowledge, which are shaped by the knowledges from Zimbabwe, Africa, and beyond.
So what lessons do we draw from it, the Mapongology?
Maybe I should start with my thesis, which informed my PhD doctoral thesis. I was studying Mapongology, and my thesis was towards the practical implications of Mapongology in shaping African development. The case of Joshua Maponga of Zimbabwe, where I was focusing on the power of his ideas in shaping decolonial thinking within African societies and the world at large.
Mapongology, the study of Joshua Maponga's powerful ideas, not just as a man, but as a living philosophy. As Professor Robert said, Mapongology is the study of Joshua Maponga's ideas in catalyzing the process of learning, relearning, and unlearning as it relates to the shaping of new forms of thinking and contributing to the global economy of knowledge, shaped by the knowledges from Zimbabwe, Africa, and beyond. Let's pause there. Catalyzing the process of learning, relearning, and unlearning. That's not a small thing. That is revolution. Because what is Africa's biggest intellectual problem today? It's not lack of education. It's overeducation in colonial systems that trained us what to think, not how to think. So Mapongology is not just a study of Joshua Maponga's speeches or sermons. It is the study of a new African method of thinking, an operating system upgrade for the African mind. It's about breaking the inherited mental patterns, questioning what we have accepted as sacred, and peeling back the colonial layers that still sit on top of African spirituality, culture, and identity. In Professor Robert's thesis, the focus was on the practical implications of Mapongology in shaping African development. The case of Joshua Maponga of Zimbabwe, focusing on the power of his ideas in shaping decolonial thinking within African societies and the world at large. That phrase, decolonial thinking, is critical. It means we are not just studying colonialism as a past event. We are diagnosing its living presence in our consciousness, in our religion, in our education, in our daily lives. Mapongology asks questions that sound dangerous in church, controversial in universities, and too radical for politics. But that's where the real healing begins. For instance, when Maponga says we must learn, unlearn, and relearn, he's not talking about mere academic exercises. He's talking about dismantling entire mental architectures, our perception of God, marriage, medicine, and even morality. Because in the African context, what we call Christianity today is often European culture baptized as holy. Our daughters are told that a white wedding is purer than a cultural one. Our sons believe that ancestral wisdom is witchcraft, and we now kneel to pray in languages our ancestors never spoke. Mapongology looks at this and says, no, this is not divine. This is programming. It is the science of peeling away the layers of colonially imposed holiness so that African consciousness can breathe again. It repositions African epistemology, that is, African ways of knowing, as equal, if not superior, to Western frameworks. Maponga becomes not just a man of God, but a cartographer of thought, mapping out roots back to indigenous intelligence, back to African metaphysics, back to original selfhood, Mapongology studies how his ideas catalyze new forms of thinking, African thinking where philosophy and spirituality merge, where learning is not just about information but about transformation. And when Professor Robert says he earned a PhD in Mapongology, it's more than just an academic title. It's a symbolic act of intellectual rebellion. It's saying we too can create our own disciplines. For too long, Africa has been the subject of study, never the author of theory. Europeans came, studied our herbs, our rhythms, our cosmos, and called it anthropology. But Mapongology flips the script. It makes Africa the center of the intellectual conversation. It takes the African mind, its stories, its myths, its contradictions, and its wisdom, and turns them into a field of study. So when you hear Mapongology, don't think it's about worshipping Maponga. It's about documenting his intellectual footprint and expanding it into a framework that helps us rethink what it means to be African in the modern world. It's about teaching Africans how to think for themselves, not against others, but for themselves, because thinking for oneself is the highest form of revolution. Mapongology, therefore, is the art of remembering Africa, putting back the dismembered parts of our mind, our story, our spirit. It's a study of intellectual resurrection, how an African thinker can awaken a continent from centuries of borrowed dreams. In the words of Maponga himself, Africa must think again. And Mapongology is that thinking born, named, and systematized.